This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian, Miss Berlin, and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
What up?
Hi.
Yeah, it's very nice. So, getting down to the wire here. I'm going to Sec 504 in 2 weeks. San Diego. I'll be in San Diego. Bring your.
That's why you look so excited.
I know, right? It's going to be an awesome time. I mean, I get to be there for a week, hobnobbing it with people in San Diego, which is a nice place. I used to live there. B-Sides is coming up, right?
Yeah, besides Austin.
Very
Apparently,
nice.
it's the largest security conference in Texas.
Shut up, bro.
That's what they're advertising
What?
it as. So yeah, there's like 20 tickets left.
Wow.
And so if you're listening and you want to go or you're procrastinating, better do it.
Yeah.
Sounds like Texas needs more security guns.
They've already
Yeah.
got what B-Sides Dallas, LasCon, B-Sides San Antonio.
InfoSec Southwest.
Oh,
Oh,
who is that? That would be Michael Goff, who is our guest this week. I guess he was tired of being sitting in our green room.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Forgot about the other Austin Con that I have nothing to do with.
Which other Austin Con?
InfoSec Southwest.
I
2 weeks ago.
I never went to that one. How was it?
I've never been either.
Wait, you were involved with it and you didn't go?
No, not InfoSec Southwest. Never was.
Oh, okay.
It's the AHA group that runs that one.
All right. Is that by invitation only then? They seem to be kind of
No, it's open.
exclusive. Okay. All right. So neither one of you this year are involved with B-Sides Austin, though, right?
Not at all.
Okay.
Well, I'm speaking. Does that count?
Oh, what are you speaking on?
Ransomware was accepted. I have a ransomware talk that I've been doing, but I'm going to ask Matt if I can do a Windows IR talk. Take a vote. B-Sides originally had cons where you'd put a bunch of people in a room and they would vote on the topic and the person would get up and talk about it. So I'm going to actually try that and ask him if I can offer the audience one of two topics and see if that flies.
That's cool.
Very nice.
I like that.
So I hope I ask him before this gets posted and he listens to it.
He don't know. People don't listen to our show. You should know better than that. You'll be
We
fine.
have 12 people.
Yeah, why do you say listener? Welcome back, listener. If there's two people in a room, it's listeners.
I doubt, dude. I don't even know if we can rub two sticks together and get a listener. I don't even listen to my own show.
Why would you? You're already here.
I know, right? I live
You
it.
know what we said.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Mr. Betcher listens to it. His Python script is the stuff of legend. That's why we have as many downloads as we have.
Mm-hmm.
So,
One episode in one ear, one episode in the other,
yep.
and while driving. So
Running it 1.5 times. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Know it.
badass. All right. So let's get down to it. Mr. Goff, why are you here this week?
To be on a podcast.
because he survived last week.
Yeah, well, no, because I'm alive from being sick Monday and Tuesday.
That's right. You were supposed to be on last week's show when we were talking about developers, whether they should be security aware or security experts. And you didn't make that one. So
No, I was kissing my pillow for a few days.
All right.
I still have some sinus leftovers, but I'm better now.
Welcome to my world. I have sinus things all the time. And, one pollen grain in the air and I'm done.
You live in land of mold.
It could be mold, actually. Yes.
Have you ever been tested for mold or fungus? Because it's rampant up there in the Pacific Northwest.
Probably.
Like you yourself, not the house.
That's right. You yourself.
Oh, so you think I'm a fungus? I love that. That's nice.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty. It's real good.
You kind of grow on us, just saying.
You're a fun guy.
Oh,
Ah,
man. Oh my
But,
God.
Why didn't I think of that one?
Oh,
and we're done.
oh my goodness. Yes.
Next week,
Tune in
we'll
next
actually
week.
talk about something interesting.
Yeah. All right. So you're here to talk about fileless malware, and there was something that came out just fairly recently about fileless malware, wasn't there?
There's been several articles lately. Cylance came out with something recently. A couple other blogs have talked about it. Tripwire's touched on it. and so, yeah, Bitcher and I were talking. We've matter of fact, one of the articles mentioned a malware that him and I have seen multiple times, Kofter, where they call this fileless malware. Now, maybe we're one up on some of the people doing the research. I'm not really sure, but we infect machines from scratch and use LogMD and good logging, properly logging, and it's clear these fileless malwares have at some point, most of the time, at least in every case I've played with it, there is files that definitely occur. And so I think there's a misunderstanding, or maybe a scare tactic, or maybe a vendor sales tactic. I don't know what to call it, but fileless malware, I think, is more scareware than it is reality. I think the industry needs to reboot or reset on this subject to be more accurate in regards to what they mean by fileless.
Yeah.
And so that's why Betcher and I talked, and I'm like, we need to talk about this subject because the articles are coming out more and more. We've seen and played with the malware. And yeah, fileless isn't necessarily fileless. So I think we need to define the space of not typical malware. Matter of fact, that goes by several names. Oddly enough, not malware is kind of one of them. So we need to look at this subject and say, what does that really mean? It's referred to as anything as fileless. It's also referred to as living off the land because you're using, let's say, built-in PowerShell, right? So you're not adding any files to the system. You're using something that's already there.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think we need to do a reset in what this really means, or what the vendors mean, or interpret what articles have already been written and say, what do they mean when they say fileless? And start from there, and then we can work our way up into the variants and or options of said fileless malware.
Okay, so the article that I looked for when I was doing my research, all of 15 minutes of it, was one from the Register, and they were talking about Microsoft Word documents that had fileless unquote unquote malware in it, and they're saying that malware from fileless attack is so called because it resides solely in memory with commands delivered directly from the internet. This approach means that there's no executable on the disk, no artifacts for conventional computer forensic analysis to pick up, rendering attacks stealthy if not invisible. Malware infections will still generate potential suspicious network traffic. So they're saying that it's fileless malware, but the attack, in bold, they tell you further down, the attack was delivered via a Word document. And I'm like, well, wait. How can you do one and still have fileless? Is it the initial piece that basically says wget, download this, and then run it, or how does that work actually?
Well, in this case, Cylance has a malware attack chain that they mentioned in their article. It's got 6 boxes in it. I'd like to offer a replacement for that. But yeah, it starts off with some sort of delivery mechanism, whether it's a Word doc in this case, an email that got a Word doc. The Word doc in and of itself is a file. It is the initial delivery mechanism. And so that right there is a file. Now, when you click on that file, you open Word doc, whether it's a macro or whether it's a Olay object, which we see a lot of now, the embedded Olay objects. We can talk about why they're starting to utilize that over macros. It then will launch something from either the macro or from the Olay object, which usually is an embedded VB script or some other scripting language, launching WScript, again, living off the land, WScript's already built in, and then executing a script. That script is a file. It exists. May not be written to disk. So I think for the sake of what the vendors mean after all the articles I've read, fileless to them, from my interpretation of the articles, is that once the box is fully infected, there are no files that can be detected on disk. Meaning if we took LogMD or SHA-1 or whatever hashing utility you want to take and looked at the before state and the after state, we wouldn't find any remnant files.
Okay.
I think that's what they mean. That's the interpretation of everything I've read, the artifact reports and whatnot, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean that it in the course of infecting the machine, it didn't have files, and it doesn't mean that it didn't drop and delete things. If it dropped a file and deleted a file, there's files involved. So I think we need to break up the types of infection to something more than the end state is fileless. Let's talk about how it got there And then what happens if you reboot? There has to be a persistence mechanism. Well, it doesn't have to be. You can, and a lot of pen testers do this. They infect the box and they know that they'll get flushed on a reboot. And they hope they can get their job done or capture whatever flag or documents they need, or leave any remnants to prove they did something. But for the most part, the bad guys want persistence.
Yeah.
And that's an ultimate goal.
So what happens with that persistence? The malware is living in memory, injecting a process or whatever, or it's its own process, but it has no corresponding file on disk. You hit reboot. What happens then?
Well, we saw this, you and I saw this with the Dridex before it was initially taken down back in the end of 2015, where the box infected, right? The Word doc opened, went out to the internet, grabbed the files, pulled them down, executed the files, deleted the files, and on disk there was nothing. When the box rebooted, the malware wrote to disk on shutdown, updated a registry key. When the system rebooted, read the registry key in auto run location, loaded the malware off a disk, and then deleted it, so that when the system was live, if you were analyzing the box live, there was no remnant there. And so that's an existence of a type of persistence that I would classify as fileless based on their classification. But in my opinion, that's not fileless at all. It's just a clever way to persist as fileware. I call it fileware because there are files involved. But yet, while it's running, it's fileless. So I think that's a great distinction in just the case of the older Dridex, which we've seen with other malware we've analyzed as well, where there is a write down on shutdown because it's a great way to get around stuff. I've had malware that wrote to disk after tripwire started, or stopped, and then loaded before tripwire started, and tripwire never saw the stuff. But yet there's a file on disk when it's powered down.
Yeah.
So these kind of indications, they refer to these as fileless. I think it's very misleading or scareful to the people looking at endpoint or saying, "Oh my gosh, they're getting so sophisticated." No, not really. This is just a little different, clever. I would not call it sophisticated until we get into some of the other ways of persistence that we can talk about that have made it into the fileless malware reports.
So if you boot into safe mode, that run key is not going to run, and therefore the file won't get deleted. So you'll see the file.
Correct.
Right there on disk.
Yeah, we saw that with Coveter and Dridex and a couple others. Pretty common. It's very easy to do, obviously. Live in memory. Hey, I got a shutdown command for the system. Oh, I got to write to disk before I get blown away. Pretty easy to do. Lots of malware does it. So, that is a classification of fileless malware, but I wouldn't call it fileless. I would call it fileware. So let's start creating some terms here so that the defender or the person that has to respond to this kind of attack or malware can start thinking about what they're looking for. When a malware analyst or IR firm does this analysis on these various odd malwares, APT attacks, whatever, they need to start being more descriptive to help the defender or the incident responder and direct them to where to look. Okay. In the case of Coveter, their payload was hidden in the registry. In the case of WinNTI, when I worked for the gaming company, their payloads were hidden in the registry. So I would refer to those to regware. So now suddenly as an IR person or a defender, okay, I've got malware that's unique. Let's call it fileless or a form of fileless. And I refer to it in my report as there's fileware or deletedware, which means that gives me an indication that files were there, got deleted. So now I know that, well, it won't be there now, but if I have a way to record that state, like file auditing in certain key directories, then I would detect that, right? It leads me to how to discover these new clever ways of persisting or infecting a machine. So I think we need to reference the persistence and or the types of things they're doing to the box to lead us defenders where to look, how to better, start looking.
And for this malware that lives in memory only, it's pretty risky because if there's a power outage, something happens to the computer, it gets unplugged, runs out of battery, then it's gone. There's no persistence there. It has to do a shutdown, right, before it can write to disk.
Yeah. There was a case where it was a ransomware boot kit thing that was running around a company to where almost like peer-to-peer, where every system watched other systems' infection, none of which lived on disk. And when a system rebooted, when the system came back up, because it had creds and the malware had this intelligence, it then reinfected the box. And the ultimate decision to clean the environment was they had to power down the entire environment. Not, start, shut down, reboot, but literally pull the plug so that systems crashed. And that's how they flushed the environment of this particular type of malware. Very clever, but we as IR people know this. Petra and I have talked about this. I've probably mentioned this in other podcasts. I definitely mentioned in my training that if you're uncertain and you start looking at certain indicators, something like, you think there's something in memory or you're certain there's something in memory, then pulling the power interrupts its ability to do whatever it is will persist it later. And it was very common for us to clean boxes in the gaming industry. After we cleaned the box, we were certain it was cleaned. We had a process in place that shut down whatever the app was that was running so we wouldn't break it, and literally through the ILO or sometimes just from the plug in the back, literally would go around the office unplugging machines to wipe the memory components so that we didn't have to worry about any unique memory only write backs on shutdown scenarios, just so we were certain the environment was clean. It's very common for us IR people to utilize that pull the power or cycle the ILO, and basically kill the box.
So from an MSSP perspective, Ms. Berlin, would you ever recommend to a customer to just pull the plug?
I let them make that decision themselves. Usually our recommendations stop before any IR.
Really?
Yeah, we don't offer IR services, so we usually don't. We try not to give many recommendations when it comes to IR.
Yeah, so they're on their own. They're gonna do it, but it's pretty common. It works. We utilized it heavily. Matter of fact, one of the malware infections we had in the gaming industry, there was this one little like netcat backdoor that they utilized only on some exchange boxes, and we actually had a power outage in one of our cities in California, and suddenly the malware was gone. And I scratched my head and it's like, are you kidding me? So I went into the other exchange server that had already been replaced. We were already in migration, so I went into the closet, pulled the power out of the thing. I just crashed the server, booted it back up, and sure enough, all the indications of the malware were gone. We were doing memory dumps, so we could see that the malware was clean. And we're just like, okay,
That's great.
cycles all the servers, shut down the SQL server, shut down Exchange, and then just yank the power. And it became a standard practice because of that particular infection. Because the Chinese realized exactly that pulling the power on boxes is not necessarily best practice for most people.
Yeah, and I could just imagine if there's a mass infection like that. Like, yeah, we have 5,000 endpoints. You just need to pull the power on all of them.
So
Yeah, and if it doesn't have run keys established, that'd be a great way to do it. Just
Just have a
Get that
handful
done.
of hard drives on hand for when you kill one of them.
yeah, but you got to
Surprising.
make sure that you check all the run keys, right?
Yeah, surprising. We don't run into that. I can't. It's been a long time since bouncing Windows really breaks the box.
Yeah.
Nix, there's probably some nuances of databases and whatnot, obviously. And again, I've mentioned shut down the database and then pull the power. So yeah, shut down your core app, whatever that is on the box, or apps or databases or whatnot. And then once you're down to pretty much the normal OS, yeah, yank the power. But most, I really don't see systems crashing like they used to, where you're like, oh crap, they're not coming back up. That's kind of been solved because of UPS drain, and just living through the fact that we've lived through this for so many years that DR has figured this out, and vendors have kind of corrected this problem.
So let me ask you something. The fileless malware, does it actually exist? Can you just, would it be something as simple as being phished? Here, click a link, and then that link would actually just download whatever was needed? Would that be considered a fileless malware?
No, I think in order to be fileless, based on all the reports I've read, it's the end infection that they're looking at, not how it got infected. So you can infect the box any way you want. It's the same mechanisms: email, phish, right? Open a Word doc.
Right.
We're starting to see the proliferation of PDFs that have a link in it. The link in it then downloads a Word doc, which has macros or embedded OLE object. They're getting, they're basically trying some extra steps. What we see now is a lot of encrypted files. so that, virus scan can't catch it, the spam filters can't read it, the file's encrypted, the password's in the body, the user opens the document because they're expecting a Word doc from company XYZ or industry XYZ, and they put the password in to see what it is, and boom, there's an Olay object. They're like, oh, okay, I'll click on that, and boom, the box infected. So it doesn't matter how, whether it's drive-by, click on here, initially the infection occurs, something must happen. Whether or not you ever record a file to disk is not what fileless, I think, is taken into account. But I think as an industry, we need to say, did it ever write a file to the disk? Then fileware is involved. And if I'm doing any kind of file auditing or folder auditing, I'm going to catch that. Or if I've got an endpoint solution that's looking at the behavior before the initial binary launches, and there's some writes or creates or moves or copies, that it will detect that. And that's important for us to know, because if that's something you want to do, then you have to evaluate your EDR solutions to catch that condition, because that's something that's important to you. I want to see that Word launched, W script, downloaded or launched a VB script, wrote that file temporarily to disk, then launched 3 PowerShell scripts, then opened a command window, and then went out to the internet, sucked something down through PowerShell, blew all that away, and now the box is infected. I want to know about that particular area, because I've learned a lot. I now know I have to watch more PowerShell logging, or I have to look at more PowerShell execution just from that behavior up to the point of infection. So we have to say, is fileware involved, or even let's call it PowerShellware, PSware. If it's storing in the registry, let's call it regware. And a payload may consist of, the initial infectware vector, however it got there. Let's call that the initial infection. Okay, infectware, however it starts, comes out. Now, is there files involved? Yep, let's call it fileware. Is it in memory only at this point, literally in memory only? Then yes, there's a memware component. Did it write a script to the registry or a payload to the registry? Let's call it regware. And then a report could literally say, this contained fileware, it contained memware, it contained regware. Oh, and by the way, it had PowerShell, so let's say it also throw in some PSware. Oh, and it used WMI as well, so now let's call it WMIware. And as somebody like you and me, or a company as an IR firm, or an investigator, or a defender, or somebody trying to, work on their own infection, can see these various components and say, I know how to look for that. I can go get a copy of login-D. I can scan the registry for large reg keys, and I can find that regware component. Okay?
You are a marketing, next-gen AV marketer's wet dream with all your wares.
Well,
I mean, those are words I would expect to see at a booth at RSA or something. I mean, that's how slick that is.
Yeah, but they're referring to it as fileless, and it's not very descriptive, right? It's a scareware tactic or a vendorware tactic.
Less
Marketing.
file.
Less file?
Less fileware.
All right.
And then in Sony's attack, we even had bootware, right? We had boot sector ware, right? So let's tell people, hey, this was a unique thing that affected the boot sector. So if you reinstalled Windows, you still got infected. Oh, because it had a bootware component. We really need to break up the definition of this fileless malware and how or what components within the system that it persists or it takes advantage of, so that we can better detect, defend, and or buy the right solution to deal with this problem.
So let me ask.
I've got an open invitation for anyone to send me some fileless malware if they can figure out how to send it.
So
memory dump, baby.
Let me
a big ass DMP file.
Guys.
Let me ask you a question. I saw a tweet earlier today. We're recording this April 28th. So earlier today, talking about somebody saying, "Hey, did anybody go back and compare the shadow brokers and equation group stuff to the Sony lock break-ins? When they got completely owned." You have some experience, Michael, with certain gaming companies that remain nameless. But did you see any of the stuff that's coming out recently with the shadow brokers and all those, and any of the attacks that look very? Do they look similar at all?
Yes. So I've got a copy of it. I held it up here in the camera earlier, right? So I actually, when I downloaded a copy of this stuff, it was on my computer. I actually had dreams about it that night. The next morning I got up, copied it off my computer, and put it on the thumb drive.
Nobody's going to see that. We're audio, so
yeah. Well, I'm just showing
theater
you guys.
of the mind.
Just to make sure that I know it's on here and not on my computer.
Well, that's good.
And we're looking again, not launching, because the question is, do I want to send my calling card to them saying, "Hey, I'm analyzing your stuff." I already know people that I could say, hey, can I analyze your stuff? But I'm a little concerned about what might happen if I launch some of these things.
Black helicopters, man.
Well, they already, maybe my IP now makes some other list that I don't necessarily want to make. But the components in there were very much in line with what I was talking about in this blog article I'm about to release this weekend, probably, in regards to this fileless malware and calling it something different. There were components of WMI in here, as well as PowerShell, as well as scripts. And again, why do they use scripts? Because, a lot of solutions don't evaluate scripts. The scripting, is it a good script or is it something you wrote or Betcha wrote? It's really hard to look at a script and say this is bad. That's why PowerShell is so popular. The engine's built into the operating system.
Yep.
Thank you, Microsoft, for the, next generation of ponage. Yeah.
You're not trying to get a blue hat invite, are you?
Yeah, well, if they're not inviting me by now, there's something wrong with them. So, I saw WMI components in there. I saw PowerShell components in there. I saw registry components in there. There are INI files in the dump that I have. So they're clearly using or trying to capitalize on these very components of saying, oh, I'll just hide my scripts and malware in the registry and load it. In the case of OneNTI, they actually commandeered the management utilities and altered them, not to break them, it turned out, but they added enough code to the configuration software solution and the AV solution that it still worked, but then it read the registry key, unencrypted the payload, dropped it to disk, launched it, and then deleted it once it launched. So very clever stuff. And so this is the kind of remnants and components I see in the NSA stuff that is something where this is why we need to have these designations. You can't say, oh, the NSA stuff is fileless. Well, how do I look for fileless malware? No, there's WMI components. So you need to look at the WMI database and say, are there any components that have been added to WMI? Are they storing stuff in the registry? Hey, look for large rich keys. There's only a handful of keys over 20K. It'd be real easy to find stuff. Even if you broke it up into 20 parts in the registry, it'd be real obvious. There are definitely components in that payload of the stuff we talked about that looks similar to what the Chinese did. The one thing that we were very paranoid because we know WinNTI has a component of this bootware. There's a unique problem with Windows in that when a Windows system boots, you can't see the entire disk configuration like you can in Linux. And so if they did a boot sector virus to where, again, the master boot record gets altered to load their stuff first and then load Windows, there's no way in Windows to check for that unless you load a driver or use something like TZWorks and load a special driver that will then look at the disk and the configuration for that. The only option was for us to walk around with Linux distros and literally boot systems to see if there were any alterations to what the normal partitions were. That scared the crap out of us because we know the WinNTI group had the technology and there just is no tool on the market that looks for this condition. And so it drove us crazy. I mean, if you ask me, that's the best way to infect a system because there's just really a lack of tools here.
So there are in the last few months with the hacking team and WikiLeaks stuff that was coming out, there was made mention of UEFI malware that infected stuff below the operating system. Have you run into anything like that? And how easy is that to detect? Or is it possible to detect that? Because obviously it's hiding. It's not holding anything in the registry for Windows. I know a lot of the UEFI stuff was Mac-based, but there must be a method by which you can infect the BIOS of the UEFI on a Windows box very similarly, right?
Yeah, I had a discussion with somebody. There was a while back where someone had said they had a copy of a hard drive that had modified firmware of the hard drive. Uh-huh. At this point, if your hard drive's firmware is infected, and every time you reinstall or disk image, doesn't matter how you do it, and suddenly the system comes up and it's infected again, you're pretty screwed. I think the end result of that story that initially happened about a year or two ago was that it was bogus, that they just didn't dot the I's and cross the T's, that there was another way the box get infected. But I've actually had a discussion with a security vendor where they have seen this and they have it in the lab. Remember, it's hardware. So, granted, there's a lot less variance of Windows hardware. There's clearly a lot less variance of Mac hardware, making it a more appealing attack for the Mac because everybody has the same hardware.
Mm-hmm.
But writing hardware and not borking something up means your code has to be really, really solid and good. Complexity just went way up. And I don't think that's a major concern for most people. Maybe for those that the NSA is going after or the Chinese government's going after, but APT not so much. Again, they don't know what hardware you're running. So if they send you, some firmware for a Lenovo and you've got HP hardware, you'd have to really know exactly what models, and you'd really have to reverse those BIOSes and make sure you didn't break anything. I don't see it as realistic today, but there's no doubt with all the different computer components that are out there, especially with Internet of Things, that we will definitely see that occurring more in the future. But that is probably in supply chain. And I think if you're a big company like, I don't know, Kaspersky, right, or NSA, you're going to, my dog is actually walking over my cord and we'll see the thing. I think you would go through a evaluation of, hey, I know this thing is typical. Let's compare this image to that image. Or we'll see a hard disk vendor saying, hey, I'm going to write a utility that will validate the firmware for the hard drive so that you can be certain it is what was working correctly and there's no additional components. I think we'll see as that occurs, vendors doing those sorts of things. Right now, I've had a lot of conversations with some of these guys. Yeah, they've heard about it. Some have even said they've seen some of it. But short of these, webcams having built-in firmware, not in an already existing Windows system, I just think that the complexity and difficulty is hard. Clearly not impossible. It's clearly been demonstrated in a lab, but it's not ready for prime time or mass distribution, in my opinion.
Yeah,
it's the least of our problems. Plus, by the way, when you download a firmware upgrade, what do? You download a binary. You launch the binary, right? So a file or fileless component, if they download it, launch it, and delete it, will have to then detonate to cause this thing, right? So, like I said, there are components that you could detect before that BIOS or UFI or modification ever occurred. So I think you have some opportunity to detect them.
Very nice. So, Ms. Berlin, Mr. Bet, your thoughts, suggestions, words to put here?
No words.
Well, on the Kofter thing, that isn't really a file on disk. It's more like code in the registry, right? There was a file component to get infected initially, but then after that, it's only living in the registry, and there's a persistent run key that you can detect. There's large registry keys that contain all the scripting necessary, whatever is in there. So yeah, it launches, it runs a specific registry key, converts that to some executable code, and then executes that. Right?
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's a file component after the initial infection.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we did see any files after the infection, because obviously on shutdown, it would just wipe everything. The run key that called this unique command structure to read the key and decrypt the key and whatnot. Again, they built it in the big long list of the run key.
Yeah, I believe it was JavaScript.
Even if it's in the
Just
registry,
JavaScript.
though, doesn't that still count as a file?
Yeah, I mean, it's a database, right? The registry is a database. It's a file on disk. And so, yeah, I don't think calling that fileless malware is a good description. I think calling it regware would be a better description. It's very targeted. It now tells all of us where to look for the component of Kofter. It's regware. I need something to search the registry. I either need to take, Redshot or LogMD, and I need to look at unique things in the registry or favorite Python script XYZ.
Yeah, I think it would be great to categorize everything now, not to fileless, but like you're saying, so regware, bootware, or whatever.
Yeah, and if there is files and deletedware, so I use the term fileware and deletedware, that gives me a great indication that stuff dropped, it got deleted, great. It's now in some fileless mode, but okay, what else is it doing? It's got regware, PSware, WMIware, memware. But we all know that all of it has memware components. I mean, that's almost a given, right? You do a memory dump and find pretty much any infected malware in that aspect. So they'll all have memware components. And we see that in all the analysis reports where they do their memory dumps and show you the jumps and various things. But yeah, we need to be much more descriptive. That's why I think fileless malware is a terrible term. Maybe good for marketing, maybe good for scareware. Oh, it's better now. It's fileless.
Who came up with that? Do you know?
Vendors, without a doubt, vendors.
I want to know.
We
which
detect
one.
fileless malware, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah, next gen
There
AD,
you
EDR, right? They clearly came up with it. All the reports I've read is indicating it. And it's funny when this term first started coming out, and I'm leaning over to Betcha going, bullshit. In the report, it talked about, this might have been a Cove term actually. It actually discussed the dropping of a file in %temp. It's like, there's a file right there. You just said it. Dropped a file, %temp, and launched it.
Yeah.
That's not fileless, man. So we do have to be more specific and help lead people where to look for this and make this generic subject of fileless malware to say, there's multiple components and here's what those components are. It would make it really a lot easier for defenders and people to understand what's going on for sure.
Well, isn't that demystifying it though? I mean, if you demystify it, then it makes it look like normal people could actually detect this stuff. Because you're like, okay, all it does is drop a registry entry in the registry. Why aren't there controls in place to make the registry read only, for instance? Why does it allow it to drop in there, or at least give you some kind of hey, something's trying to write to the registry. Are you going to allow this? Is it something where the user isn't going to be smart enough to realize what that means and click yes anyway?
Well, Windows is fundamentally flawed in its design, right? It has this ring 0, ring 1 concept in the user space or HKey current user in the registry's name or the C users directory or program data directory, all users, is available to every user no matter how much you lock them down. So as a user, I have the ability, every ransomware on the planet for the most part will infect the most locked down user, because they will have map drive letters, they have access to HKey current users, they have run keys, etc., where you can persist, and they have C users, app data local low, roaming, app data local temp, all this disk space that they can write to. So Windows is just flawed in that this is where Firefox and Chrome record their settings for the user when you install stuff as a user. So locking it down would just break Windows. It's just not how it's designed. So it leads a very wide opportunity for the malwareans to take advantage of so many ways to infect the box. I mean, DLL sideloading seems like an old term, but the thing I like about it the most is you don't have to compromise anything. You just have to figure out what binary needs some DLL, create a malicious version of that DLL, drop it right next to the binary in whatever directory it lives in, and then call the correct binary. And when that binary loads, when you launch, McAfee, which we've seen there's been exploits of that DLL sideloading, then boom, it loads the DLL and your system's infected. The malwarian didn't have to do anything, didn't have to compromise anything, they just had to place a file on the disk. Windows is just fundamentally flawed this way, and in theory, you really can't lock it down, make it read only. If you want that kind of capability, you need to go more to the Mac model. And again, 6% of malware affects Macs, and there's been a big uptick on that. So wow, they're probably up to 7%. But you have to go to a Mac or Linux where there's more controls in the space. Not impossible to infect, but more difficult because it's a better designed OS.
So, so what would be like I hate to ask what the future of malware is going to be, but are there other attack vectors that maybe haven't been looked at yet? Can malware hide in the unused portion of the disk? Can you add things like inodes? Well, if you're using Linux, you have inodes, but can you add file descriptors or something to a sparse part of the drive that doesn't have any other data on it and not show up on the file table? I mean, do we have infectors like that already, or is that something that hasn't been looked at yet?
Oh yeah, you got symlinks in Windows, similar pointers to different locations on disk. You have extended file attributes. Malware there is space at the end of the file where you can record things about the file, metadata, for example, and components were in that. Matter of fact, I think the Sony attack had some of this. You have holy moly, the Sony attack also had the boot sector where it literally took advantage and wrote the Linux partition to an unused space, right? You got a 250 gig disk, you partition it in the boot sector, has a little 100 meg partition in Windows, and the rest you say is C drive. It never uses 100% of that. And the Sony attack had that, right? There was a component off to the side where they had told the system after they pressed the D-Day button and it borked all the boxes, it loaded the OS off that little tiny sector. So yeah, you have that option as well. It's almost endless on how you can infect Windows.
I think because Windows needs to stay popular with working people, it has to be easy to use. And because it's easy to use, a lot of these malware have social engineering component. In fact, most of them do. So if Windows stays easy to use for regular people, I mean, it just lends itself to social engineering attacks. I mean, that's pretty much it. They need people to be able to install the tools that they need to get their job done. In Linux, yeah, it's a lot harder. You have to compile pretty much everything, right? That you want to run. I saw a tweet today that said, happy 20th birthday Linux, now compile your cake. And it had a picture of eggs and flour and all this stuff, right? So Windows is easy to use and people are much more productive. Regular IT workers are much more productive in Windows. And, so it's just going to be easy to infect in that way. And so we need to get better to detect these things.
Cool.
Yeah, the reality is this industry is old enough now where security can say, well, we have all these security tools. They keep coming out with more security tools. I've preached in many a talk. You guys need to quit focusing on prevention. Our industry's broken if you at this point are still focusing on prevention. The next gen endpoint solutions will block all binaries from executing. Okay, I'll go to VB script and PowerShell, right? So there's always a gap. There's always a hole. Matter of fact, one of the vendors we were talking the other day with even said that this particular malware they got looked at the vendor's installation. He had infected the box before he installed the vendor agent, and it acted one way. When he installed the vendor agent software, it proceeded to execute a bunch of NetSH firewall commands to basically block the ability of the agent to communicate outbound. So it altered the behavior of the box to say, hey, Windows Firewall, don't allow this binary to talk outside the box. Right? So this concept of this widget will be the last widget you ever buy, we should all know better by now. That the reality is we need to be much better at detection and response. And the industry needs to help us get there by defining these malware attack chain. In this case, what's the attack vector? What's the initial infection? What's the malware execution type, fileware, deleteaware, ridgeware, etc.? What's the specialty execution, DLL injection, memory injection, whatnot? What's the persistence, and then what's the details of the malware running, right? We need to look at that and say, all right, how can all the detection and prevention solutions out there, can they do some detection capability? If you only buy a prevention solution and you don't look at any detective capabilities, you're going to get owned, period. Sorry. Right? There's no way around it. There are just so many gaps and holes and users clicking on stuff that somebody will figure it out. So we do, as Brian said, Betcher said, we have to get much better and do more detection and response using all these various tools and exploiting the tools we do have.
So
which is the logic of LogMD, right? We're a completely detective solution.
Detective and response would be like the third-party solution, like I don't know, like endpoint data or endpoint type protection or a next gen AV kind of thing, or can you roll your own? Is it possible to even roll your own?
You can write a Python script, right? BDS has a compiled Python thingamajig, and it's CrowdStrike, Cylance, and the list is long. They all have their versions and whatnot, and there are, I think what we'll start seeing now in the next 2-3 years is bypasses for these tools. Here's how I can infect the system and turn off. Really, all you need to do is stop the agent from doing whatever it's doing. Is everybody running these things in prevention mode? Probably not. There's probably a lot of people running these in detection only mode because I might break something. People are still very fearful of breaking stuff. So if I can figure out how to not have that thing report, but it's still working, still running, then win-win.
Isn't that like the network IPS thing? Everybody would install it, turn it on listening mode, and just leave it and never do anything with it?
Pretty much, or never enable it.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times, right? The malwareans realize you're running this sort of stuff, so they generate a whole bunch of noise to cause a whole bunch of false positives. Hey, let's run this PowerShell script that'll just fly through all these PowerShell things to fill your PowerShell logs. And so, if I have one bad thing I'm doing in PowerShell, but I throw a bunch of queries in the system that's seemingly normal, or execute a bunch of exchange lookups, or pruning and whatnot. And again, we're all getting moved to PowerShell from Windows 10 and forward. That's coming any day now. Has anybody got the creators update on Windows 10 yet?
Yeah, I got it on my my Surface over here.
Have you launched the command shell to see if it's PowerShell now? Because that was one of the changes they were supposed to make.
Oh, right. No, actually, I don't use the command shell. I actually use Commander, CMDER, for a more authentic console. So yeah, I'm not a good Windows user. So yeah. I don't.
Yeah, detection and response is where it's at. We have to get better at it. You've got to have a staffer or two on call that can take the output of some of these tools and say, great, you blocked this, but look at this interesting behavior before it blocked it. Look what it did over here. There's an awful lot of PowerShell involved, but that didn't get blocked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matter of fact, Betcher and I talked to a couple of vendors recently, and point blank, they don't block PowerShell. And I think one of them said, well, there's so many people using PowerShell now, how would we know what to block? Yeah, thank you, Microsoft. Post-exploitation kit known as PowerShell. Yeah, it's going to be highly exploited in the future.
Okay. Well, I think we've before we started the show, I was like, man, I hope we can have half an hour because, I thought about doing the Verizon data, the 2017 DBIR report, but Mr. Betcher assured me that we would not have to worry about the time. So, and then that appears to be the case. So, so Mr. Goff,
he's right again.
You're always right. You're always right, Mr. Betcher. So,
he's often right. Let's leave it at that.
He's more often right.
I think his wife would disagree with us wholeheartedly, but you never know.
Yeah.
I don't use Google. I've got my wife. She knows everything.
Exactly.
We have a guy that has that cup.
Listen to this show.
No, there's a guy with a cup that says that. I don't need Google. My wife knows everything.
Nice. So where are you going to be speaking? You mentioned besides Austin. Are you going to be anywhere else?
A week after besides Austin, I will be in Denver speaking at Rocky Mountain Information Security Con there. And then I will be going to besides Denver the day after that. And then the following week after that, I'm keynote speaking at Hack Miami.
Holy shit.
And then in June, I will be speaking at Show Me Con. That takes me through the beginning of June.
That's right.
It's a very good conference.
Show Me Con.
Yeah. It is. I love Show Me Con.
Yeah.
Dave and gang do a really good job on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I spoke there last year.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know if you ever drive up to the Springfield area, but we mentioned last week B-Sides Springfield is trying to start up. So they only have 24 tickets left.
Yeah, Land of Lincoln. Yeah, no, I've been to Springfield.
No, that's Illinois. That's Illinois. Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah, good point.
Missouri.
Springfield, whatever. Still Land of Lincoln. He lived there too, I'm sure.
Isn't there a Springfield in every state?
There's a lot of Springfields.
Probably true.
There's a lot of Springfields.
Missouri. I don't think I've been to Springfield. Where the heck's Springfield, Missouri?
It's in southwest Missouri, just north of Branson.
I believe there is a Springfield in just about every state, and that's why in The Simpsons they live in Springfield.
Yeah.
So they're in the Oakers somewhere.
In the Ozarks, yeah.
Like Oakers, the Okies.
Only 34 states have a Springfield.
Really?
Only 34.
Only 34, by the way.
Yeah. It's lame.
Only.
Wow, it's a lot. What kind of companies are there? Walmart, I don't know if this got by the industry, but I got notified that Walmart had their very first con the same weekend as B-Sides Oklahoma or one of those cons recently, maybe HUSECCon weekend.
They have a really good security team.
Walmart?
Yeah, fairly large. But Walmart had their first, because they want to get back to the community conference. I got some email about it, and I was like, huh. I don't recall reading or seeing anything about it.
That's in Bentonville, right? Bentonville, Arkansas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would call that the recruiting conference is what I would see that as.
Is it a security conference or?
It's a security con. Yeah, it was.
Amazon does. Microsoft does. So, I mean, why not Walmart?
They didn't label it as a Walmart security con. They called it something generic, but it was sponsored by Walmart.
Okay.
It was. We're trying to get back to the community thing.
Wait. What's the generic Walmart brand?
Something choice.
I can't think.
Something choice.
Great choice.
Great choice.
Great choice. The Great Choice Con.
Okay, nice.
Great choice con. Yeah.
Great. We're never gonna get sponsored by Walmart. Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate you.
Equate is what I was thinking of.
Equate.
Great.
Equate con. You're killing me.
You said generic.
Yeah.
Springfield, Missouri. What kind of companies are in Springfield, Missouri?
I don't know. There's a lot of. I know there's several hospitals in the area. It's about 7,500, 100,000 people. They're trying to get, and there's several universities, so they're trying to get the InfoSec community there started. So, they started out with 60 tickets. Last I saw, they had like 23 left, so there's at least 40 people coming, which isn't bad for an inaugural, B-Sides. And it's free.
Start somewhere. You gotta start somewhere. Yeah, I went to a con in the Ozarks, Lake of the Ozarks. It was really pretty up that neck of the woods, especially I would think in the springtime. So.
Yep. This will be in July, so it'll be like 350 degrees and humid. Having lived there, I know. Trust me. So, yeah. Mr. Goff, if people wanted to discuss malware, send you samples, or phish you, how would they go about going and doing that?
Well, they can reach us at a website at log-md.com or imfsecurity.com and reach out to us that way, or follow the blog Hacker Hurricane .com and get a hold of us that way, or of course the website with the Windows logging cheat sheets at malwarearchaeology.com.
Yeah. So this LogMD stuff it's taken off. I heard your developer's a pretty awful person.
He's pretty mild mannered, I'd say.
Really?
He doesn't like his tester very much, but
Yeah.
That's because I break shit.
Well, that's a tester's job, break stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's doing pretty well. We're rapidly approaching 1,000 users, so that's a good thing.
Wow.
That shows that people seem to be interested in using it.
Very cool. Very cool.
Saves us a lot of time, so people actually dig into it. And we started to release some videos. I don't know if Betcher's mentioned those, but we released another video. This one had voiceover. I actually spoke on the second one.
Very nice.
As we start to learn our tool of recording things.
Very nice.
Very short. They're 5-minute videos, so it's designed to help you very quickly.
Yeah, I hate to click on YouTube video to learn something, and it's like a 45-minute video. I'm going, did they have an abridged version here?
Cliff Notes.
Learning takes time, Betcher. You can't just go, I want the Cliff Notes version.
So what's a Cliff Note version of SANS training? Just curious.
I don't know.
It's everybody's speechless.
Yeah.
I've never taken a SANS training, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. I like the SANS training. I actually have to be in a classroom. I can't self-pace myself because my self-pace is turtle. And
mine is squirrel.
You need to be
I was going to say, I
recalibrated.
thought his was squirrel.
Squirrel.
Yeah,
Squirrel.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mr. Betcher, since Mr. Goff mentioned your LogMD stuff, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to, phish you or send you malware stuff or talk to you about malwares?
Well, there is a Slack channel, like BreakSec Slack channel
Really?
that I'm on, so you
I did
can
not know that.
hit me up there.
You're sure
Yeah,
you're
for
on
those 10 people who didn't know. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at BetcherPwned.
Right
We
on.
do, we'll be in the next release announcing this as well. We do have a LogMD professional Slack channel that will be advertised to those pro users moving forward to reach out as a community. So we do have that now with some of our advanced users, but we'll open that up to all the pro users.
Great. Another Slack channel to take away people from my Slack channel. Great.
You can be in more than one.
I know. I'm in like 7.
Yeah.
Gods. So, Miss
Right.
Berlin, Sadly, Miss Berlin, your book sales are coming to an end. They're running out of books to sell because it's just running like hotcakes.
Right.
So
Get them now.
Ebooks. Hey man, I got
Yeah.
a story for you. So I wrote the first book in Skype. I don't know if anybody knows about that. Years ago, like well over 10 years ago. And a couple months ago, I got a residual check from one of the ebook publishers.
Nice.
Yeah. So clearly somebody forgot to do the books. There was an acquisition. Selvier bought Singer's Press, who I wrote for. So Selvier forgot to check something about the I's crossed the
For
T's.
like years?
Yeah, it was over $10,000.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's great.
So so the moral of the story there is try to find out who the ebook people are that are doing it, the work, who they work with, and try to monitor that through the reports. Because
Amazon has great reporting.
Well, do they use others? I mean, there were 5 or 6 on this list in my reports. There was like 5 or 6. I'm like, how would I ever have known this?
Right.
Talk about the
I don't know.
win-win in the honor system. I'm like, yes. Cool.
That's why you have book agents. That's why you got to have book agent to keep track of that stuff.
That's my one complaint about O'Reilly is they have no stats.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Like I get a weekly. This is how many physical and this is how many ebooks. That's the only stat we have.
Yeah, it's an honor system.
Like
so
I
hey,
love metrics and just.
Skype has had 3 owners since I wrote the book. So from my perspective, the fact that somehow 10 years later they figured out to pay me that much money, I'm like, score. Yeah, right. Big win. Right. So watch out for that ebook money. It can add up.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
So Miss Berlin, if people wanted to discuss your book with you or tell you how much they liked it or the opposite of that, how would they do so?
Well, you could do what everybody else is doing and like tweet me selfies of the picture. That's been going over really well.
Yeah.
And if you do that, I just automatically show up.
Cool.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. So Betcher brought the book in and he says, here, read the logging chapter. And so I flipped through the last page. There's an image of my ransomware Splunk dashboard.
Yes.
And there's a bit.ly link. Like, why doesn't it just say hackerhurricane.com?
No. All right. So
I know why they do that because I went through it with my books where they said we don't, unless we get permission, we will not put the direct link. You have to
I didn't know that. Like I went through all the edits and the original link was there.
Yeah, they do that so they don't have to reach out and give me guest permission.
Wow, that's stupid.
Yeah. I went through that with the Skype book and the video conferencing book.
All right.
All the vendors had to get permission.
I totally would have gotten permission.
Yeah, you would have.
I feel
anyway, I turned that last page and there's an image. I'm like, hey, that's my ransomware Splunk image.
Yeah, I use that all the time. Like I use that in several talks. I'm like, this is great.
There's a great story of that. This particular company I worked for was getting taken down for 2 days while they, figured out where it was coming from, started the restore process. It was real pain for them. And I'd set this thing up and we went from, fortunately, these machines were VM virtual clients. So we went from, before I joined and then joining, went from 2 days to first detecting it, getting a hold of the guy and saying, shut this PC off, to 40 minutes from start of that slide. It would page my phone in case it was not during business hours, and immediately paged the guy who had the, VM client console who could turn off the network card. And the report, fortunately, which isn't in the image, but all the directories that were affected were in that report. So now the IT guys immediately know what to restore. So they went from 2-day outage to 40 minutes to restoring. It was huge improvement. So yeah.
All right. So I want to not to make this go too much longer, but I do have a question for you now that you've brought all that up. Did they have like a significant impact in performance with turning on advanced logging?
Oh, no. That is an old wives' tale. We had full blown, this was a file server that image came off of, turned on, and keep in mind, I'm not doing reads. I never look for reads. It's always the creates I'm after. Yeah. Because, again, you make a file copy, it makes a copy, it creates another copy. So don't focus. Basically, when you go to file logging in Windows, its defaults, the boxes that are actually checked, you want to do the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
And that's basically the rule of thumb. So turn off all the reads and then turn on the creates and deletes. And deletes are even noisy, but really focus at the creates and the permission changes and things.
Yeah, by the time I read that, I wasn't managing Windows boxes anymore, so I couldn't even try it out.
To give you an idea, that screen and the quantity of files, this company did real estate. It was a company that this other company had bought, and they were processing PDFs and images in the thousands per users. So that graph indicates tens of thousands of files in a very short period of time. And the file auditing was turned on in these boxes. These are VM machines in the case of the servers. So these weren't super beefy boxes, they were VMs, and didn't even make a blip, like less than 5%. The systems are just way too fast. You'd have to really overdo it to have any real performance impact on doing file share auditing or file auditing on a box these days.
Yeah.
Even full-blown registry auditing, it'd be tough to overwhelm a box.
Cool. Well, that's sorry to make it go further, but
No, that's cool.
Educational opportunity for the user.
I've been waiting to ask you that question, and I totally forgot.
It was shocking how little performance, because when I started seeing the alerts and the quantity, because it happens, all these people would come out in the field, upload tens of thousands of files, and then boom, someone clicks the wrong PDF and bam, everything gets encrypted in minutes. And I'm thinking, oh, the box is going to get just killed. No, never did. Didn't even make a performance blip. And
That's awesome.
VMware's got all those consoles; they could track everything.
Right.
Yeah, I was real shocked at how little impact on the VM. So it'd have even less impact on real hardware.
Very nice. All right. Well, I'm gonna finish up me because last but not least, last but least actually, I'm just the guy. Oh, that's a good doggy. Hello, good doggy.
Cole stuck with me the whole time in the podcast.
Oh, he's a good doggy. How old is Cole? He looks like
he's got some Craig on. He's turning 8. Best rescue ever. This dog has so much personality. It's not even funny.
That's awesome. All right. Well,
I think he wants a cracker.
What kind of cracker? Like saltines or Ritz or what?
No, lamb. I feed the dogs because I have a Ridgeback, so they have to have high protein. Lamb flavored crackers. Not a lot of grain. It's dog food, man. It's not break food.
Okay.
I was like, are you eating the lamb flavored crackers?
Yeah. It tastes good with a little mint jelly, I heard. But
I think I would eat jalapeno jelly for those crackers.
Nice.
But he loves them.
Very cool. All right. So the podcast can be found at BreakSec on Twitter. We can be found, I can be found at Brian Break on Twitter, BRYAN, BRAKE. We have the Slack channel that numerous people have mentioned here. You can sign up at https://breaksec.signup.team. We're doing our week 5 of our Python class with our good friend Matt at #cyber on Twitter there. We're also doing our book club. We're doing the Defense Security Handbook that Miss Amanda and Mr. Lee wrote. We're going through about chapter 8 this week, right? That sounds right.
I don't know. I missed the last 3. So.
Yes, I know. It's all right. #not all right. So
when you get to chapter 20, let me know.
Chapter 20
it's the logging chapter.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll definitely invite you back if you want to do that.
I hope it's a couple-hour training session.
It's like an hour. The Python is an hour, but I mean we have homework, and we have half a dozen people who show up, and we learn about Python.
The book club's gone. It's usually an hour-ish.
Yeah,
but it's gone more than that.
Yeah, we normally do about an hour, but it does go over. We have good discussion. Last week was about incident response and business continuity stuff. So we're going through the whole thing, and it works out really well. So. We also do CTF. Natas is kicking our ass on that. We're doing the over the wire Natas war game. We're trying to get a handle on that one. So, that's always available. If you are a fan of doing CTFs, you can come out and help us. Sign up over there. We have a new leadership channel. Past podcast guest Phil Byer wanted a leadership chat channel, so we posted up one of those for him so that we can discuss about leadership and techniques and topics and things like that. So there's a lot to do over there. We've got about 340 people, give or take, and we're a very active Slack channel. So if you are interested, feel free to hit us up. breaksec.signup.team. All right. Well, any last thoughts, words, suggestions, actions, anything?
Where are you going to be at, Amanda? Where am I going to run into you next?
I'm doing Circle City Con, 614 Con, and besides Cleveland, all in June.
Busy time.
All in June.
Yeah.
You going to go to Show Me Con?
No.
It's a little too far west.
I want to, but I didn't submit to speak, and that's really the only way I would have been able to go, is because I don't want to spend all my paycheck on flights.
Yeah, because you got to
I'm
save
not
up
gonna-
for DerbyCon. So
Yeah, I'll be at Derby. I'll be at DEF CON.
We'll see each other at Derby, and we'll all go collect at Nick.
Yes.
Muck, 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 muck. Yeah,
that's McDouglas, right? Yeah, that's inside joke for Michael.
I hope
Vick.
someone actually recorded that. That would have been fun.
Oh,
I'm
it's
gonna
being
get that
recorded.
played back to me at some point.
Still,
Yep.
it's still. Oh, you mean the original?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for this week on Breakdown Security. So everyone have a great week, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.